back to No Interruptions. I'm Kate, and today we are finally breaking down the most common pro-abortion arguments, so get excited. So obviously there are a lot of arguments that come up on the pro-abortion side when we're talking about abortion, not even just from those who are actively participating in the discussion, even those who are kind of laid back and want to be supportive of women. They all use the same kind of blanket argument, and that is a woman's right to choose. Now, there are two kind of parts to this that I want to hit on. Number one is, I don't think people realize how weak of an argument a right to choose is. I mean, if you think about it, you're basically saying that I think you should choose what you think and it should be okay. And yes, I believe in free will. I think we all have a certain liberty to go about our day-to-day lives and make decisions, whether they be good ones or bad ones. However, that doesn't give me the right to expect people to support me and stand behind me if I walk down the street and stab somebody in the neck. Now, that might sound like an extreme example, but that's basically the argument of right to choose. Like, I should be able to do whatever I want. Yeah, you can, but you still have to face the consequences of those actions, and we're not going to pretend like those actions are okay. You can choose them if you want, but that doesn't make it right.
So just chill out. Drink a 7-Up, eat a moon pie, quit murdering people.
I think that's the biggest issue with the right to choose argument, is that yes, you can have a right to choose, but just because you have the right to choose whether to murder someone or not to murder someone, that doesn't make it okay. Like, it just doesn't. We're praising people for being able to have free will and supporting that free will, but we're not discerning whether or not these actions are just or moral. In fact, we're saying that by choosing yourself, that in itself is moral, which doesn't make any sense.
What the hell are you talking about?
The second part of the right to choose is that the right to choose is kind of used as a blanket kind of, this should cover everything type of deal. When in reality, the right to choose only really covers yourself. It doesn't apply to everyone else. So, for example, I'll just use the same example as I used before. If I go down the street and stab somebody in the neck, yeah, I should be able to choose to do that if I have a murderous instinct. But guess what? I'm going to jail if I do that. Why am I going to jail? Because I just assaulted someone else's personhood. The line stops at you. You start playing into somebody else's personhood, that's still your choice, but you're gonna pay for it. And don't expect us to pretend like it's empowering or right in any way. So now, moving past the choice argument, since it's the weakest one I've ever heard, now we're on to reproductive rights. Should women be able to choose their timing of reproduction? Yes, everyone should choose if and when they have sex, which is why rape is such a problem, because it's the exact opposite of that. That is the thing that is taking away bodily autonomy, not pregnancy. Pregnancy just happens to be the result, sometimes, of that very, very evil act, which is why I will not be upset with someone proposing the death penalty to a rapist, because I think they should be castrated or killed. But that's a subject for another time. Reproductive rights. When does reproduction happen? It happens when you conceive. There is no point in the pregnancy where we can say, yesterday it wasn't a person, today it is a person. Suddenly, somewhere along the lines, it's a person. So that's why it doesn't make sense when people support early-term abortions and not late-term abortions. They're like, late-term, it's too well-formed, like it actually looks like a person now, so maybe not late-term, but early-term, yeah, that's fine. But that doesn't make any sense, because then there's no line, right? Like, is it at 15 weeks? Is it at 14 weeks? When is it a human? Is it 14 weeks in a day? What happens after that day? Is it just a gradual becoming of human? Because that's not how it works.
You're into science fiction!
The only thing we have to go on of when human life starts, unique DNA, right? Growth, change, all of these things is at conception. That's it. That's not up for debate. Look at the science. And for those who are in favor of abortion at any point in the pregnancy, which I feel like fewer people are because word is getting out about what actually happens during an abortion, especially late-term abortions. But if you are someone who is in favor of abortion at any point in the pregnancy, what does that mean for right after a baby is born? Is the vaginal canal some kind of magic tunnel where a thing suddenly becomes a human? No, of course not. That would be ridiculous.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
Which again, to my point, goes back to conception. So this next one is a pretty popular argument, but it's not really an argument at the same time. It's, you know, people who are pro-abortion saying that pro-lifers don't care about the baby after it's born, they just care about it when it's in the womb. Which is funny because it's like a pro-abortion person's like, you don't care about babies after they're born. And pro-lifers are like, you don't care about babies ever. I just think it's funny. But for this argument, in all seriousness, that's absolutely not true. First off, the claim that pro-lifers don't care about babies after they're born. Most of the pregnancy help centers that are in existence are pro-life. They're there to help women, to give them resources when they're financially struggling, to give them, you know, parenting resources like actual physical supplies and parenting classes and all these kinds of things. So to say that they don't care about women or babies after the child is born just doesn't make any sense, plain and simple.
This is a load of barnacles.
And by the way, pro-lifers are also most of the people who are advocating for adoption, for other resources, for funding, for fathers to be held accountable, right? To pay child support. All of these things, pro-lifers, including myself, are in favor of. So this next one is actually a comment I got on a previous video of mine that I did on Roe v. Wade, I think like a couple months ago? Last month, actually, in July. Anyways, so this person is talking about how miscarriages are going to be criminalized. So this guy says abortion shouldn't be a federal or state right. It's a human right. People forcing others to bear children against their will are the ones who should finance all their respective child support. Let's see. Miscarriages differ. You may point out that miscarriages differ from abortions, but under jurisdiction that criminalizes abortion, miscarriages are investigated as potential murder. Okay, this is an important one because I feel like a lot of people freak out because the mainstream media likes to take obscure stories and blow them up into this kind of weird dystopian, like, oh, you know, we're going to a time that's worse than The Handmaid's Tale, blah, blah, blah. To his first point, he says that people forcing others to bear children, I think he's talking about pro-lifers, right? In which case, I would just send him a bunch of links to places that are run by pro-lifers, like pregnancy help centers, crisis pregnancy centers, all of these kinds of places that actually help mothers and help children through the process of pregnancy and also after pregnancy. But to his second point about miscarriages, I think what he's referring to is there was this big story about this lady, what's her name? Okay, so there was this lady, her name is Brittany Pula. So anyways, this woman was pregnant and she miscarried. First and foremost, I would just like to point out that I am not in favor of women being prosecuted for having miscarriages. It's a very sad thing. And in most cases, it's not the mother's fault, right? It's no one's fault. It's just, it happens. It's a tragedy. However, as always, the media likes to scare people and blow things up. Anyways, they did a autopsy on the baby and they found a few things that the media fails to mention. Number one, the baby tested positive for methamphetamine. They also found that the baby had a congenital abnormality. There was something wrong with the pregnancy, essentially, and it resulted in a miscarriage. Now, people like to say that she had a miscarriage because of the congenital abnormality, that it had nothing to do with her meth use. It had, the baby would have been fine, essentially, if she had been using meth while pregnant. And then, of course, they lost, and this woman was jailed. I am not a doctor. I cannot say that this meth was the direct cause of her miscarriage. But hypothetically, if you're using hard drugs and you have a miscarriage, yes, it should be investigated. And yes, you should be charged with manslaughter if you're found guilty. Because you're using things like meth and hard drugs while you're pregnant, while you know you're pregnant. So, I mean, it seems pretty obvious. What about cases of rape and incest? Okay, so we talked about this a little bit before. First of all, morality is not situational, which means something is either right or wrong on its own, and that doesn't change depending on how you frame it. So it doesn't matter what the situation is, you can't say that something's right in one situation and wrong in another situation. Murder is wrong however you frame it, okay? Yes, cases of rape and incest are terrible. They're evil. They should be, strictly punished. I personally think that rapists should be castrated or killed, and I'm not ashamed to admit that at all. But this question of rape and incest it's almost like the pro-abortion people over there are trying to use this very small percentage of cases to justify all of it. Which also doesn't work because, number one, the percentages are very low of these cases of rape and incest. And number two, again, you're framing it differently doesn't change the fact that it's wrong. Another thing that really bothers me about this argument is that people don't realize the amount of cases of rape and incest and abuse that have been covered up by the abortion industry. So, there was actually a lady, her name is Lila Rose, and she's the founder of Live Action. You should go check her out on all of her platforms because she's awesome. Essentially, a few years ago, she went undercover to a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic, posing as a 15-year-old girl, I think. And also, when she went in, she said that her boyfriend was actually in his 30s, I think. And the lady at Planned Parenthood was just like, we don't report that stuff. It's fine. It's whatever. And that just makes me think, how many people are being trafficked right now? And their traffickers are taking these girls in to get abortions to cover up the trafficking that's going on. This just blows my mind and makes me so angry. But this argument that people are using to try to justify the entire abortion industry is actually covering up more abuse than anything else ever. Again, like I said, of reported cases, this is a very small amount. However, Planned Parenthood and places like that aren't required to report anything. So if someone comes to them and they're like, listen, I'm being trafficked, I need help. And they're like, cool. Here's an abortion. Go back to your trafficker. Hey, buddy. Guys, he's growing so fast and I can't handle it. So, in all seriousness, I really wish people were talking about this more. But guess what? I get to make this video for you guys and you get to share it so we can get the word out about this stuff. The last one that I want to go over today, because this video is already going to be way too long, is the idea that pro-lifers are mostly just a bunch of old white men trying to make rules about women's bodies that they don't know anything about. Again, very untrue. Let me just give you a little history lesson really quick. The founding feminists, who were very instrumental in giving us all our rights, by the way, guess what? They were against abortion. Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Mary Wollstonecraft, all of these people were very against abortion. They saw it as, a war on women. I think, Alice Paul said that it was the ultimate exploitation of women. Infanticide, degradation of women. Feminism has become this sort of distorted thing where everything a woman says needs to be empowered. Everything she does has to be right. Everything she does has to be praised. And by the way, a couple weeks ago, we didn't even know what a woman was. We couldn't define it, right? Some people still can't. There are plenty of women behind the pro-life movement. Lila Rose, I mentioned at Live Action. There are so many women behind the pro-life movement. The media just really likes to either not listen or shut us up or have some pro-abortion person scream a little bit louder. But surprise, surprise, we're still here and we're standing strong and we're coming for you. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if there is a video you would like to see me do on this channel. I would love to hear your requests. Other than that, I will see you next time.
It's Naomi Wolf of Daily Clout, and I am asking you to please, if you like the video you just saw, support us, become a member, donate. You can send checks to P.O. Box 24, Millerton, New York, 12546, or go to Daily Clout, DAILYCLOUT, become a member or donate. Thank you so much for your support. Every penny goes for paying our hardworking staff, paying hosting costs, and paying our lawyers who have been leading the fight to keep you safe and free, to keep the Constitution safe and to keep you free. Thank you so much.